Good evening again. I'd like to reconvene the open session at, I have 6:59, I guess 7 o'clock, make it legal. Make it legal. And if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you could remain standing for a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. You may be seated. And Mr. Levis, if you could notify the public of the safety and emergency exits, please.
Sure. In case of an emergency, to the rear of the room, to your left and right, there are exits. If you go out to the exit, you can exit the building to either the left or your right.
Thank you. And Mr. Pearson, if you would do the honor of reading the mission of Coventry Public Schools.
The Coventry Public Schools, with community partnerships, educate, inspire, and motivate students to be lifelong learners.
Thank you. And just to inform the public, the school committee had an executive session, very brief, maybe 5-10 minutes, at which time we took 2 votes. Both were unanimous. One was on our homeschooling request, and the other one was to approve the executive session minutes of 9/13. That being said, is there a motion to seal the records of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to sections 42-46-4 and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the approval of our minutes, which was our reference number 1. The open meeting minutes of 9/13/18. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the open meeting of 9/13/2018 as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Oh, an abstention. Okay, so 4 with 1 abstention. I should have realized that from the other one. Moving on to agenda item number 6, personnel. There are no personnel actions, so we're going to move into the public agenda. For those of you who don't come usually to our meetings, the public agenda is open to the public. If the school committee is going to do a vote, we will make a motion, but before the vote is actually called, the public can ask questions or make comments according to that motion, and discuss the issue. That being said, we can move to number 7. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. We have a celebration. We're going to have to table this, but I still want to mention it because it's Alexandria Hornstein she's an elementary art teacher, and she was designated as the Rhode Island Art Educators Association Young Educator of the Year. But she's getting married in about 11 days, and wasn't able to be here tonight, but we had already put the agenda out, so I wanted to just acknowledge her, and she'll come back at our next school committee meeting.
Wonderful.
So we want to congratulate her.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Anything from the public? Okay, we can move on to agenda item number 8, which is our field trip request, which was our reference number 2. Mr. Levis, did you want to talk about
So
this?
this is just, this is being brought, I recommend that we approve this being brought before the committee because it is an overnight trip, but this is something that the volleyball team has done. And so I would recommend that we approve this.
Was it actually an overnight? I thought they came
Yes.
back and forth and back
Nope.
and forth.
I believe it's overnight.
Are they here? Yeah, it is overnight.
Jillian's here.
Yeah. So how come there's no cost to, I saw that there was no cost to the players, so I was wondering how that was. If they were overnight. That's why I kind of assumed they weren't staying over, but,
We do a lot of fundraising.
oh, okay.
And we think that the most productive thing to do with our fundraising money is to go to events that will make them better, not so much by coping. So we spend our money from our booster club on letting them experience playing at at a better level than Rhode Island can really offer. So
Okay,
that's why
great. No, that's fine. Donna, do you know who that was who spoke?
I believe that was Krebs, Coach Krebs.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
just want to check for the record,
Yes, I'm
for the minutes. Okay, so is there, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. Excuse me. I have a question. Is the money that is raised by the Booster Club? You said that you raise money and that you use it for the attendance at these meetings. So I'm just wondering, is it your Booster Club that's raising the money?
The girls raise their money to travel. So we'll do a fundraiser and they all equally have to fundraise the same amount of money, and whatever they fundraise goes toward them, which usually covers the cost of the steaks. It's only about $80. So if they fundraise 100, the other 20 will go into the Booster Club for further equipment or T-shirts, and the 80 will go toward their hotel rooms.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just want to remind you that we do have a fundraising and distribution of materials policy. And I would just ask that you would just review it as soon as you can. It's posted on our website, and that way you can be sure that everything is done according to the policy. So thank you very much.
Okay, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the field trip request for coaches Bartlett and Krebs to travel with 17 members of the girls' volleyball team to Springfield, Massachusetts for a volleyball tournament on Sunday, October 7, 2018, and returning on Monday, October 8, 2018.
I second the motion.
Any further questions from the committee? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to number 9, the distribution of information policy discussion. I can say what I think, but I can go down the list and see. I think I just want to give a little bit of preface to this to kind of make people feel a little more comfortable. When we first discussed a distribution policy from the school committee, please bear with me, my memory is not what it used to be. I think we tabled the original policy because there was a lot of discussion about whether or not PTAs would be able to send home flyers. And I think there were some people on this committee that felt very strongly that our PTAs could not survive without being able to do that. So there was some discussion back and forth, and it got tabled. And I think we threw it back to the policy committee, and they can speak to that decision as to why the policy was written the way it was. When it came before us again in July, I guess we passed it. Is that true? July?
That's correct.
Okay. So when that was passed, forgive myself for not reading that policy carefully. I really wasn't thinking of it in the same way I had thought about the original discussion, which was, what are the PTAs going to do? So I, in fact, voted yes. I was confused. Personally, now thinking back, I don't know why I made that decision. I guess we really didn't have a discussion that night about what that would mean to the PTAs. So I wasn't really thinking, I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but at this point, I would like to reconsider this policy and bring that back to the policy committee and maybe try to rewrite that in some way, shape, or form so that the PTAs are, in fact, considered. And there are some other issues that we may be able to leave that policy the way it is, but just make sure that every event that the PTAs run are sponsored in some ways by the school, because then that would be a sponsored event from all of our schools. But that's something, again, for the policy committee to decide. So that's my feeling right now, so I'll just go down the line on the discussion. Dave?
I did not see this at all until this morning when I looked at the Black Rock, came up on my timeline, Black Rock Hill PTA Incorporated. When I saw that, I immediately consulted a couple of advisors about it from connected with Black Rock, and they explained to me the situation. And Kathy is absolutely right. I made the same mistake. July was an extremely tough month on us because we're in the process of trying to ratify the teacher contract and in negotiations. And I also voted in favor of this. And I thought it was a fundraising policy. I didn't realize it was the distribution policy. Anyways, what I believe I will do is recommend the same thing that Kathy does, refer it back to the committee. But I would see that I believe the PTA should get an exemption because they raise money for our schools and are the backbone for the education process in our elementary, middle, and high schools. So, yes, I agree with Kathleen 100%.
Ann?
I'm very willing, being a member of the policy committee, I'm very willing to review this again. However, we spent over a year in discussion on this, and our legal counsel has given us the advice that if we allow any group that is not raising money for a school-sponsored activity, that means Coventry itself is sponsoring the activity, if we let any group distribute materials, we have to allow all groups to do it. We cannot allow just one group to do it, give exemptions to a PTA, and not give exemptions to any other group. So we're faced with a dilemma that we need to provide equal access to all groups. So you representing PTAs, consider yourself as a parent receiving an email that might come from some religious group that wants to run a Bible school, which we did have distributed last summer, wants to run a Bible school, vacation Bible school, and wants you to know about that. Or some other group that sends something out. It might be a group that, like Planned Parenthood, maybe you do not agree with their policies, maybe you do, but that would be coming through your email also. So we discussed what we would do about this, and we said that one possibility would be to allow groups that wanted to distribute materials or information, they could request the listserv for their particular school, and that they could then send out information via the listserv. So it would not be coming through the school, but it would be coming through your organization using the email. So that's an option for you to consider. But as I said, we're willing to take it back to the policy committee. We've discussed all these options, and it's really all or nothing. And as parents, do you want to be flooded with all kinds of information, much of which may not have anything to do with something that you're interested in or not? So that's the dilemma that we face.
Thank you, Ann. Donna?
Hi, I too voted yes, and I have to be honest with you, I thought the PTA was considered part of the school. And I honestly did not think that this was going to affect the PTA until I got called from one of my constituents about my school, Black Rock. And it really upset me because I know that's what the Black Rock kids depend on. They depend on that fundraising. So I would like for that to go back to the committee. And really, if it goes back to the policy committee, the PTA should actually be involved. And maybe between all of you, you can come up with a good solution to where we don't have to, we can include you without having to include everybody, you know, all the other organizations that maybe we don't want in there. So.
Mr. Pearson?
I wish we had this discussion in July.
I know, I wish we did too.
Okay.
But for some reason, we didn't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, because I
didn't.
didn't
And
read
this isn't
the
a-
policy as written. No.
I know, it's not a
Sorry.
finger pointing exercise. I just wish we had this discussion in July. It is a philosophical discussion. What is the demeanor of the committee? Are we going to have an open door policy or are we going to have a restrictive policy? Right now, this is a restrictive policy saying that only school communications can go out through school channels. If we want to open the door for PTA, Dr. Dixon is correct. According to legal counsel, we have to open the door for everyone. Planned Parenthood, NRA, whoever wants to send, we do it for Coventry Rams, so if the NRA wants to start a little shooters league at the Peacedale shooting range, those flyers could start coming through the backpacks and through the emails. I'm just letting you know that could happen. We have not seen a lot of things like that happen, though I would say a religious flyer going through is an example of something that might offend parents. We could definitely re-examine this. If the committee wants an open door policy, sure, absolutely. I think that's the discussion that should have happened in July. So we can go back to the table, craft an open door policy. I will tell you right now, there is no exception for any group.
I get it.
Legally, we cannot do that. The ACLU will be beating down our door. I love the PTA, but
No, I understand.
they are a separate organization from the schools.
Right.
So we can open this back up,
Mm-hmm.
re-examine it, and come back to the committee with a recommendation.
I do want to mention that when we had, I do want to mention that when we did discuss this in a policy meeting, there were very active members from the Western Coventry PTA who attended many, many meetings. So meetings were open, and we did receive feedback and comment from many, many people, including members of the PTA. So as Mr. Pearson did mention, when we do bring this back, or if we do bring this back to our policy subcommittee, you are welcome to come and give your feedback. And we'd also ask you to think about some of the alternatives, because it has to be all or nothing. So you have to remember that as parents, it will be all or nothing. And do you want all these other kinds of information to be coming through with your own children? So think about some alternatives, such as use of listserv or some other kinds of means. So that's very important for you to consider too. So it's all or nothing, and that's where we have to be from a legal point of view.
I mean, unfortunately, we have considered.
Wait, I haven't asked for public comment yet, sorry. I still have a few more questions. Sorry. Mr. Anderson, I just have one question, and this is a process thing. Do we need to rescind this policy, or do we rescind it and say we're sending it back, or, because obviously.
I think my recommendation
So
to
what
you
is the
would be
recommendation?
simply to ask that the committee review it, but I would not rescind it tonight, because if you rescind it tonight, then you have no policy. And the superintendent needs direction to know tomorrow morning if somebody walks in and hands flyers and say, I want these to go home in the backpacks of BlackRock, whether he should put them in the backpacks or not.
Okay, so I'm a little confused in the sense that how can we be pragmatic about this?
Additionally, Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Pardon me. I do want to point out that it's only on the agenda as a
No,
discussion. not a
okay,
vote.
so we can just send it back or whatever. That being said, if there were some flyers that went home, would that be, how would that affect our legal standing?
Well, what it would be two things. One, it would be inconsistent with the policy on the books right now, and as Mr. Pearson has indicated, it's not on the agenda to rescind it now. All it does is that if somebody else outside of the school department comes along and says, you and Dr. Dixon summarized the law better than I could, that if somebody else comes along and says, I want to distribute flyers, it will be very difficult for the superintendent to say no. And the superintendent will have to make a decision as to whether or not to say yes or no. But if he says no, he will be exposing himself and the district to a suit from the people who want the flyers distributed.
The only thing I'm concerned about, and I get all of that, is between now and the next policy meeting and maybe a revision of this policy, and then coming back to this committee, a lot of time could go by in the sense that this is the fundraising season and flyer season for our PTAs.
I understand that, and I'm being pragmatic in the sense that if the superintendent allows flyers to go home, he can do that.
Okay, all right,
However, I just want you to all
Anybody could
understand
do it.
that
Okay.
that
got it.
you are putting your position at risk if he says no to some other group.
And I have a further last question. Does he have to review every single flyer from every school, or could a principal make that decision, and/or if they had a question, they could run it by
That would
him?
be totally up to him.
Okay. Guess you're on the hot seat.
Yeah, so,
Just, I mean, I'll be very clear if that, and we've done this before, I'm not gonna put the principals in that position. So I would review, any flyer that came from a nonprofit would go out. If that's the direction from the school committee chair, that's what would happen. That we would continue to do the practice that we had before. I feel that in the past.
You didn't see all the PTA flyers, did you? I'd be amazed.
No, but I'm talking about, no, I'm not talking about, but you're looking at just doing the PTA. I don't see how.
No, I'm just saying right now, from now till we revisit this policy. I get the whole thing that if the school committee votes and says they want an
No.
open door policy, then anything that might be above,
I think the takeaway I'm
Different?
hearing from the superintendent is that the superintendent gets the reality of the situation that you want an open, that you want the
That
PTA
might.
to be
We don't-
distribute.
yeah.
I'm also hearing from the superintendent, though, that
wants
he will,
a
he will,
vote
he
from
will,
us.
he will let other flyers go out as well.
okay.
Exactly. That's the point, is I can't, and again, we all support the PTA, and I've had meetings with them, and they understand where I'm coming from. It's the position will be that if we allow those flyers, then the YMCA that sent me a flyer today that I didn't send out, and Nathaniel Green that sent another flyer that I haven't sent out, those flyers will also be going out. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not, I believe the direction isn't just to allow the PTA flyers to go out, that as superintendent, I feel, based on the legal advice that we've received from our attorney, to stay in good legal standing, I would allow all flyers to go out.
Okay, I get that. I also, well, when the PTA folks that are here get up, they can probably say how many flyers they send out on a given year, which could be a lot. And so I'm just wondering, will it be up to the principal, or will the PTA president, for example, have to send the flyer to Mr. Levis to get confirmation that it's okay to go out?
That's how Mr. Levis does it administratively. I defer to Mr. Levis,
Okay,
whether
so
he wants to see
you'll have
them
to
or
think
whether
about
he
that.
wants
Okay.
the principals.
All right.
I'm just indicating that my takeaway from Mr. Levis, my advice to Mr. Levis is, if we're going to start opening the door for the PTA while we're revising the policy, the door will be open for other people while we're revising the policy. And I don't want anyone to be surprised. They get a phone call saying, this came home from my child's backpack. I think this is inappropriate. Why was this given to my child?
And could someone from the policy committee refresh my memory and let me know, was there a distribution policy that was updated, or did we not have one previously?
We did not have one sorry, do you mind if we did not have one previously. I think your previous recollection of a policy that came before us that was sent back might have been the fundraising policy, because the fundraising policy has a certain condition in it that's making sure we're in compliance with state law as far as distributing.
State law has limitations on sending fundraising information home with children.
It does. So the fundraising policy has that element to it, and that was revised. And the distribution policy, I think, even though it was discussed in the policy subcommittee for a year with a lot of public participation, a lot of PTA participation, it didn't come before this committee until July.
So the first time was July.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
I've
So I
been
guess
known
I
to
am
get it wrong,
confused
too.
about the fundraising policy.
They're very similar issues.
I-
I think that's why.
And so what excuse
maybe
me
that's why we
again,
got confused.
what does the fundraising policy say about, how would a PTA, for example, send home information about the Yankee Candle, or can they, or they won't, and it's forbidden?
I don't have the fundraising policy in front of me.
And
Can't.
the fundraising policy, if I may, the fundraising policy we put forth was only for school-sponsored, so it would be like Team Rocco or something at or grade 4 at Black Rock. It's for school-sponsored fundraising. It didn't, and it's explicit. It says it doesn't doesn't pertain to
Booster Club.
booster clubs, PTA. So the policy that we put forward, and I think that some of the confusion is that we did come forward over a year ago with an original fundraiser policy that talked about distribution in it. And there was a lot of feedback. We tabled it for probably over a year. And then we came back with two separate policies, right? Trying to find a happy medium. We focus on fundraising just for in-school, school-sponsored. And then the distribution policy was separate. So that was, and we did have, like, we had a first reading, and then we had the second reading and approval. So.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to piece it all together since I don't sit at the policy committee.
And this one
And the
is odd
interesting-
because it was
yeah.
such a long
But the,
timeline.
but the interesting piece for me is I think I remember researching and finding other policies in other school districts about the fundraising piece for like PTA, and finding that even though there is a state law that says X, there is a way to somehow get around it. I'm not sure exactly, because I don't know of any PTO or PTA that doesn't send home fundraising flyers in kids' backpacks, because the PTA or the parent or the PTO cannot stand at the school door as parents are coming in or leaving and give them a flyer.
I
It
think
just
that-
can't happen.
I think that was the idea, though, in terms of what Dr. Dixon explained about providing the listserv to.
But not everyone has a computer, nor do they.
I understand that. All
So-
I'm saying is that there is a statute that deals with fundraising that puts limitations on the distribution of materials through schools. That's not a Coventry School Committee policy, that's the General Assembly. In addition to that, and separate from that, there are limitations that the school committee has to, as Dr. Dixon indicated, decide whether you want an open policy or not an open policy. And frankly, where this came up, is it came up in another school district where they were asked to send home flyers promoting a religious group. That school district did not have a policy. That school district sent home flyers. I then asked the superintendent of schools, do you send home flyers for the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts? And the superintendent said, of course we do. I said, then you have to send home the flyer for the religious group too. Can't pick, the superintendent cannot be in a position of saying, I like this group, I don't like that group. That violates the First Amendment.
So, but I think I remember, I think the spirit of the law that the GA passed was in regards to a case where I think Target wanted to fundraise in the schools, basically. And so a concerned citizen had someone sponsor that. And then when the GA was asked later about that, it was like, oh, well, PTA's not involved. And it was just these big corporation kind of things, not these parent groups. And so, do you know of any school system, and you do,
Yeah, sure. Little Compton uses the listserv method.
and do you know of some school districts that do still continue to send flyers home for PTA fundraising with the little booklet from whatever fundraiser they're-
I can't say that I can't say I have had the issue of sending home the fundraiser. I have had the issue come up in other districts as to whether the PTA is separate from the school department. And I know that in at least one of the districts I represent, they are very careful to keep the two separate, because if they become entangled, then the PTA will become subject to all the rules and regulations of the school department as promulgated by RIDE.
Yeah. And that's why I cringed. Sorry, I apologize for making a face, but that's why I cringed when we talk about school-sponsored events. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but if we have a school-sponsored event, it is subject to all the rules of the
Absolutely.
school department. Right.
Absolutely.
So what,
And where this
Including the
is-
handling and control of money.
no, I get that. So what you're telling me is that someone needs to sponsor another bill at the General Assembly to get around this?
That would be one solution, but that's not my role.
Because I know for a fact there are many schools and
I-
many
I-
PTAs that are still sending home fundraising materials in backpacks.
I understand
So
that.
they're breaking the law, and I'm not sure what the penalty would be if you broke the law.
And here's where those issues come up. And I'll give you an example from the city of Cranston. The city of Cranston had for 50 years a tableau above in the auditorium that had certain religious statements, and it was there for 50 years without
And
complaint.
someone called the question, I know.
And someone called the
Yes.
question, and Cranston spent $250,000 on legal fees and lost. So all I'm trying to do here, and this is my job,
Is to tell us the law.
is to tell you what the law is, to tell you what your options are. It's your job as the elected officials to make a policy decision. But I want you to understand the consequences down the line. That's all.
Okay. I think we need to go to the General Assembly and change this, because obviously it doesn't make any sense. It'd be one thing if the PTA was just raising money for themselves or something, and I don't know what. They are an integral part of the support. Almost all of our special events in our schools are all funded by the PTA because we don't have the funding. So to take that ability away from our PTAs is like cutting.
But may I say something? The law is not structured to target PTAs. The law is, correct me if I'm wrong again, is structured to prevent the transfer of commercial materials home
Exactly.
with the students. There are other methods of fundraising that don't involve commercial materials.
So then you'd have to say that,
But so my only point is it's a little, I don't want to portray the law, not that I'm backing the law, because Lord knows I criticize the GA more than probably anyone here. I just don't think the law is targeting PTA. It's just one of the unintended consequences that our
Exactly.
short-sighted General Assembly likes
which is
to
why
do
we
for
should,
school
we should go
committees.
forward and try to fix that in some
Sure,
way.
and let's make a list of unfunded mandates. When we have our legislative meeting, can we have a list of unfunded mandates that
Ask
we can
someone to
get rid of?
sponsor
Because
this
we
bill.
never have that list. Please, thank you.
Well, that's the problem.
There's a litany of things the GA needs to
Can we
correct.
vote tonight to allow Craig to?
We're-
No, we can't
No,
do
it's-
anything.
we're
There's
not
nothing
voting
on the
tonight,
agenda
but I
that
think that
says,
the committee has made the message loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so we're going to just send this back to policy. So do we need to vote on that?
No, because you
I
can't
think
vote
we're-
because it's not
Oh,
on
no,
the
because it wasn't,
agenda,
on the
but-
discussion was just the discussion.
Yeah,
Okay.
this-
So we have had our say. Does anybody else want to say anything before we go to the public?
I would just mention that our next policy meeting is going to be October 11th, and we can put it on the agenda for that meeting.
What time is it?
Our meetings are from 4 to 6 p.m. in the school administration building.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So are there any members from the public that would like to speak? And if you do come to the microphone, please, your name and address. Thank you.
Hi, Connie Hargreaves, 587 Hope Furnace Road. I'm on the council, and we've been doing some research since we heard about the decision on July 26th. And we have found 3 local school districts that have not exempted their PTAs from sending home stuff. Cranston actually excluded PTAs from their distribution policy. Barrington and North Kingston, it has to be approved by the principals and/or the superintendent. So I just want you guys to be aware, there are districts that are making that exemption for PTAs. And I think it's important that when we talk about using emails, that we do have a large quantity of people in our district that do not have access to that. So you are limiting them from participating in school functions that are meant to bring unity to our schools. So they would be left out of things like that. I think that's important for you to know. And I also think that it's important to remember that at this point with Coventry's budget the way it is, the PTAs are stepping in and taking on responsibilities that are solely the school departments, and we are fine with that. But if we can't send our flyers out, then we can't help you. And I think that's the biggest thing for us is we spend a lot of time trying to bring unity to the schools and help wherever we can. And I printed out the policies for you guys to see. Can I bring them up to you?
Sure.
Okay. So you have Barrington, Cranston, and North Kingston here. If I can get the. So, I'll pass those out. I can sign
Thank you.
these.
Thank you, Colin. Anyone else?
Yamuna Smith, 4 Ironwood Drive, Coventry. And just wanted to piggyback on what she said. I understand that you want to stop the third-party organizations, but there's a clear difference between one being pure for marketing versus other being fundraising and giving back to the school, back to the kids. So there might be we need to find a fine line of finding a difference between marketing as well as the schools. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I comment on that real quick? Because that's an important topic that definitely came up in discussions. And I think we are going to have to examine establishing some parameters. But I want to make it clear, whatever parameters we establish will not prevent third parties from coming in. For example, I'll make fun of the Democrats this time. The Coventry Democrats are having a fundraiser, and they decide to donate 10% of the proceeds to the school department. Then it becomes a school fundraiser, and we have to. So even if we have parameters that say only school fundraisers or school-related fundraisers, there's a lot of groups that find the loophole. That's the issue.
I happen to notice here that they actually say political, religious in nature, so they actually exclude specific.
Yeah.
Sure, and I bet
Yeah.
they'll get sued for
It
that.
probably is.
But I don't know, but maybe one of these for Jeremy.
Hi.
Hi, Marissa Eisner, 4 Monroe Drive. So one policy that was given to you was North Kingstown, and I can tell you to give you at least an option as to how those things work. So North Kingstown, they have all of those flyers come in, but they send them directly through the district listserv to those parents. So they don't go home through the children. So the only thing that goes home through the children are the PTO flyers. So that stuff goes through, so it's direct connection with the school, but anything else that is a district piece, baseball, soccer, basketball, a church group, an event that's going on in town, they get them and they call them fun flyers. And then it's about 10 pages long, but it isn't an email and it goes directly to the parents. So you still have to accommodate those third-party organizations, but it's not going through the hands of the children. And we've already seen the impact at Hopkins Hill. We had 100 fewer people at our first event because this happened in the midst of us distributing the flyers and from Mrs. Tankrell being able to send something on her listserv saying, don't forget to pay for this event. Don't forget as a reminder. And everything that's happening right now, of course, we've already asked the listserv. Mr. Pearson already came and spoke to us and gave us more clarification so we understood what's going on. I can't explain to you how much more work that is for us, and we work really hard to make sure that we provide for our schools. All of the assemblies at Hopkins Hill are paid through our PTA funds. They don't have a dime otherwise. It is a full Title I school. It takes a lot for us to get people involved and for people to attend events. And if we don't have that paper piece, I can't tell you when I send those forms home, like an interest survey, how many bring back just a phone number. And if they're not getting the emails, and a lot of those people love the events because that is how, and I know if there's a will, there's a way, but some people don't have, if they're working 2 jobs, they don't have that time to go around and do that. And we want to provide for our school community. And right now, this is really, it's really stymieing, it's preventing us from being able to do so. If you could please, when you go back, look at that. And like they said, there's 3 other districts and there's other places. All we do, and I understand one and all, but how are we not the exception when all we do is provide for our schools? We volunteer our time. We don't ask for a dime. We ask for people just to contribute to the schools, and we don't give it to anybody else but our children. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Do I have to give my
Sure.
name and everything again? Okay, is there any way, with the policy in effect at the moment, is there any way that our PTAs could send a letter out asking parents if they are willing to opt in to PTA flyers?
Oh, I don't,
What would be then they are willingly saying yes.
We talked about that, but we don't have an answer on that yet. You brought that up
Right.
before, but we don't have an answer on that. And I think the key, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer, but I think that's something that's brought to the table. And I think it's, at the end of the day,
At that point, it takes the
Right.
concern out of your hands because they're saying, yes, I want to receive those flyers from the.
right, my understanding, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I still feel that at the end of the day, this school department, school committee is going to have to make a decision. As Mr. Pearson said, I don't see how we can, even though other districts do it, I think that we have to be all-inclusive. And so that, my understanding of this will be at the end of the day, we will allow all these nonprofits to do, flyers. And most of them, like I said, we might have once or twice a year from a youth soccer league or something like that. And I think, like Mr. Pearson said, it may not be an issue. I think we just have to be willing to understand that at some point it could be, and then we can't reverse direction or it goes back to the policy council. So I personally, I hear everything and I've heard everything everybody says, and I fully understand it as long as we understand the big picture. And I think, Mr. Anderson is the school committee, he's not my attorney, he's the school committee's attorney, and I think he's given us excellent advice, and at the end of the day, those are the decisions that we'll have to make, you know? But I hear exactly what you're saying.
Hi, Brenda Russell, 847 Reed Schoolhouse Road. I just want to add up to what everybody else has said and point out that the tax exempt purpose and the mission statement of these PTAs are to support the school. I'm not sure if that's something that can go back to the policy committee, and maybe that can be the basis of how to exempt the PTAs, but it is in the tax exempt purpose and the missions of the PTA solely to support the school and nothing else. So I think that's something that could be considered a way possibly to exempt from this policy.
Good evening. My name's Tom Naray, 225 Fairview Avenue in Coventry. So I'm the BlackRock PTA treasurer. And just a couple quick things, because I had something longer typed out. But so first thing is, Ms. Pearson, at the beginning of the meeting, you read the mission statement. So I'm going to just reread it quick for the school committee. Coventry Public Schools with community partnerships, and that's what we are. Okay, so that's your mission statement, that's the community partnership is us. We consider ourselves a quasi-school agency. We're represented at all our meetings with a member of the administration from that school. There is a teacher's representative at those meetings. So with that being said, in thinking about this whole policy, knowing that we are a quasi-agency of the school, I don't understand why it would be so difficult to exclude us and not be able to back that up with that type of support. One other thing I will mention is that, and as it was said earlier, we can't afford to give our students and families less than we already do. Again, we discussed it, Superintendent Levis, you talked in a meeting back in April or May, March area at BlackRock School, and you discussed how the community faces a budgetary burden losing children to charter schools and to pathway schools because they have more to offer. If we eliminate the extracurricular activities that are being sponsored by the PTAs because we eliminate the ability of the PTA to do their job, we're just going to lose more money and more students to other organizations, potentially, because that's what we've talked about tonight, is potentially there could be damaging flyers and leaflets going home, potentially. So potentially, we could lose a boatload of students whose families aren't happy because drama is all of a sudden gone from the school. Because I know at BlackRock last year, we paid for the school play, $1,500 put on the production of the school play. Without that, 100 kids involved, how many of those families could potentially decide to leave the school? So just, again, I know it's going to be under review, but please consider those things when you're reviewing this policy. Thank you.
Hi, Andrea Hartman, 1 Sharp Street in Coventry. I just have a few questions, well, not even questions, more comments rather. I know we were talking about email, and I think for my school in particular, it's more of the paper with the folders that is the biggest issue. I personally have 3 children, so I don't know how you sign up for PTA jail, but I'm your girl. It's the paper, I line up backpacks and I check folders. That's what I do. You know, I don't look on emails. I don't look on social media. I look in backpacks because that's my first go-to for school communication. You know, my school is a Title I school. My students, most of them, excuse me, I take that back. Some of my students do not have computer access. How are we going to handle that, and how are we going to accommodate that when we're going to be taking out a bunch of students about, I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to swear to this, I also want to give you another number. About 55% of my students are free and reduced lunch. We as a PTA provide help for them. We provide activities that they can do, things that are at cost, things that are costing our PTA, but we want to do it for the students because that's what we do. We do this for the students. I don't know who mentioned door-to-door stuff. I can guarantee you as a parent, I will never allow my child to do door-to-door anything. It's as a PTA, we're paying for things that by all rights the school department should be paying for. But we do it for the PTA because that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what we do. We support the school. That's what we do. And that's why we do what we do. So that's what I have, and just thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stacy Brookshire. I live on 1 Brookfield Road. I have a question for the board. I've been doing this for 8 years, and this is my first year of failing the children. How do I get a flyer out? Your next meeting is not till October 11th, and this is going to be my first year to fail these kids. That's my question to you. Our harvest event at Black Rock will be canceled. There are kids that know that, and there are kids that are waiting. I don't know how you ran your event, but I can't figure a way to do it.
We were lucky that the policy didn't come out until we sent out the flyers first, but then we had to stop, which is why we had
Yep.
no enrollment.
I was gonna sit out there and watch every parent's car come in off school property and try to hand them out that way. But I was gonna put it on Facebook. But we have kids that know that the harvest event was coming up. It is already booked, and it is mostly paid for. But I have to cancel it. It was supposed to be October 5th at Salisbury Farm. I actually have the flyer on me, but it is unable to go out. We don't make any money on it. We have it's pretty much a Halloween party for all the kids that they have every year. And for 8 years running, I've been at this party and at this Halloween event to run it for all the kids.
Dressed as a bumblebee too.
Dressed as a bumblebee too, yes, there are pictures of that.
Yes.
I'm under the impression that
But I was.
while we are reconsidering this policy, even though the policy is in place, while we're reconsidering it, Mr. Levis will make decisions on flyers.
I mean, I even
Is
have
that-
a flyer right
is
now
that
you
correct?
can look at.
If that's,
I don't even know if it'll be able to be
I mean,
1 week.
so that, I think when Mr. Anderson was up here to answer your question is that if I make those decisions, I've already stated how those decisions will be made.
Everybody will.
So,
Yes. So I don't think you have to cancel your event, quite frankly.
I mean, I can show you the flyer right now. I brought it with me.
She'd like it to go to print.
I would like it to go to print by tomorrow.
Any final comments? Yeah.
Hi, Jessica Kuhn, 41 Ray Street. I know it's going to be under reservation
Review.
review, but as it states right now, is it just the flyers, or can we give the principal information to send on the listserv for events?
I think the listserv is okay.
We're talking, every
just-
communication we're talking about is the same thing. So
Yes.
Craig, I hate to say it, it's on your shoulders right now. So you have to
and
put out, it's
yeah.
going to be handled administratively. There has to be a directive from the superintendent to communicate to the building heads, I would recommend, and determine flyers, listservs, all of that.
So listservs, flyers, same boat.
But I mean, also you could request a copy of the listserv so that you could send out the flyer yourself. So there are alternatives.
So it doesn't have to come from the principal, it could come from my email to the people on the listserv.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So
There are alternatives. I mean, you could request the copy, as we just mentioned, and you can send it out yourself. So nothing is going to prevent you from doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, one thing that I do want to make clear to the committee and make everybody aware of, it was suggested tonight that the PTAs are quasi-school agencies. I want to make it very clear that the PTAs are not school agencies. The PTAs are independent organizations that make their own decisions. The PTAs are not supervised by the school committee. The school committee does not tell the PTAs how to spend their money. The school committee does not tell the PTAs what to serve for food at the Harvest Festival. If it's a school event, and if it's a school department event, you will follow the health and wellness policy, and I'm not sure what would be left to eat at a Halloween party. Several of the PTAs here in Coventry are separately incorporated by the Secretary of State.
Oh, so most of them are.
Right.
But here's an interesting piece for you to think about as a lawyer. PTAs are not allowed to do just anything in the schools.
Nor is anyone else who uses the schools.
Exactly. So
Nor is anyone else, but we are.
principals have always, my knowledge, in this district and probably other districts, have always approved flyers. They don't go out without approval from the principal.
And again, the point I'm simply making is that 2 points. One, PTAs are independent organizations.
No, I get that, I know.
And two is that, as the superintendent and Dr. Dixon have indicated, that with regard to policy, with regard to distribution of policies, if it's done through the listserv and we give a copy, as Dr. Dixon suggested, the PTA can send out anything it wants on an email address other than the Coventry schools. But once we send it out through the Coventry schools, we have to treat all groups the same. That's the only point I'm making. That's why Dr. Dixon's suggestion that the PTA get a copy of the listserv and then send out whatever they'd like, however often they'd like, that's totally their business and not ours. And that's the way it should be. The school committee shouldn't be dictating what the PTA says or does.
The only thing I see about a problem with a listserv that a PTA gets is principals or people sign up for a listserv with the thought that it's going to come from Coventry Public Schools, not from a private group. And so when they sign up in the future, they would have to be told that there's a possibility that their address, their email address, could be used by another.
And that notice is in our handbooks right now.
Okay. And does that also mean that any other 501c3 could also get the list?
Anybody could get the list. It's in our handbooks right now, and it's not just list. It's photographs. It's the yearbook at the high school. It's the graduation program and so forth. We make that very clear in our handbook that we do give out information about students.
No, I don't. I know that, but we decide whether or not we can release it to what organization.
We've already
correct?
decided that in terms of our FERPA policy and the notice that's in the student handbooks. And if parents don't want that, they simply have to say, "Don't give out my information." It's an opt-out.
Okay, so I'm confused. So just clarify it for me. We're talking about that anybody who wants to send out something, we have to let them. But does that mean we can give them, we have to provide a listserv to them? So
Yes.
Right, we discussed this last year when we went over the FERPA notifications and directory, specifically the directory notification.
I didn't think that it meant that any organization at all could get our listservs.
And the answer to that is that's exactly what the FERPA notice says.
Oh.
That's exactly what the FERPA notice is. Just said, I don't know whether Coventry does it at the high school. Most high schools put students' addresses in the yearbook. And it's part of the FERPA notice that if you don't want your address given out, you can opt out.
But if Macy's approached the school department and
If
said,
Macy's approached the school department, we would provide the same information to anybody.
we would give them the listservs?
Yes. if people don't like, the General Assembly has said that you cannot discriminate that way.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So-
I
so-
think most businesses think they can't get a hold of someone's listserv information. But, I mean, I know it's sold out there all over the place, but.
I don't write the law, I'm just
No,
telling
no,
you what
okay.
the
All right,
laws
so
are.
that's what the law says, okay. All right.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
Stacy, could you come up here for a sec?
Well,
Stacy, is the event you're planning going to be at
Didn't get it.
Black Rock Elementary School?
It's at Salisbury Farm.
Oh, so the health and wellness policy has no effect?
And
Oh, it
also
does,
with the
it
health
does,
and
it
wellness
does.
policy, we make sure we have stuff that is healthy,
Doesn't matter where it is.
as opposed to some of the stuff that is not healthy. We always have to do that due to the fact of the health and wellness policy through Coventry
Very good.
for all the years. And also to talk with you, our PTA is not only a group, but it is not just made up of people, it is made up of parents of these students, just so you're aware. Not just people in general, it's the parents of the students that get together, of the students that are of the school, of the grandparents of the school. So the PTA is a little different than other groups that come in. But I do also do the health and wellness policy every time I run an event, because we have to think about that.
So can I just say, I mean, just to try to take something complex and make it simple. To me, though, this is about, we've talked to people that I've spoken with. My understanding now is two things, is that we're going to go back to the policy subcommittee and address this. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to the way that things had been in the past, just to be clear. And I'll send direction out. And this has nothing to do with the PTA. I know it's very personal, but this could be just as personal to the Coventry Youth Soccer, to the Coventry Little League. These are all the things that it impacts, and we get that. So I just want to be clear that, and I've said that publicly. I said it tonight to our administrators. We've said this all along. We know that we need the support of the PTA. So this is more, just to be clear, this is more about. And I think, Tom, you had said like the what ifs, right? And in the world we're in today, we're just talking about that. But again, until we come back with a revised policy, I will send out something to staff and people and let people know that, we'll continue with the practice that it was in the past.
I just want to say though, while we're grouping the PTA with everybody else, and I'm just gonna put this out there, the PTA is the only group that works within the confines of that school, that specifically sits down with that principal and plans those functions with the principal guiding us and running us through the whole thing. These other ones that you're talking about, they are not in the schools, they are not doing everything for the children, and they are not working completely with that school. That's the difference. And it really is the difference.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm talking about from a legal perspective in terms of the distribution of information. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. This just comes down to distribution of information. So,
But other districts are doing it.
That's right, and just my last statement, not to get into the legality of quasi-school agency, that's kind of what I meant, like, where I'm not given the formal definition, but again, and I understand that the principal doesn't direct us, but definitely has final say in us disseminating information or doing something with the students and families within that school as a PTA. So yes, it's guidance, and again, we're made up of families and the community, and that's the whole reason we're there.
Thank you. Any other? One more?
Brooke Kelly, 28 Audubon Lane, Hope, Rhode Island. I have no doubt that I think you guys will revisit the policy. I just hopefully will end with one last thought, and that is by eliminating the paper copies of flyers that we send home, we're now excluding children that may not be able to come to these events, and that opens another can of worms. We're completing, Start with Hello this week. And that's about inclusion and including everybody and making sure everyone knows that they can have fun and have a friend. We're excluding those children now that don't have resources from an email or that maybe live with other people that don't have forms of email. And that paper copy is a huge asset to us as PTA. That's my only thought.
Thank you. So I just have one final note, and that is I sincerely want to apologize for not doing my homework. I know that if I had read both of these policies, the fundraising and the distribution policy, in the light, and I had my PTA cap on, I would have said, wait a second, this isn't, we need to revisit this. I felt it originally when we put it back. I don't know how it got by me, quite frankly. I think because when we discussed it, no one said, well, what about the PTAs? And that includes principals that might have been sitting here or anybody, quite frankly. The policy committee, being Mr. Levis and our lawyer and Mr. Pearson and Dr. Dixon, they were working through it for a year, but I don't go to those meetings. And so when it did come forward, and I think I can speak for Dave and for Donna, I approved something I shouldn't have approved, quite frankly. And I apologize for that. I don't know how we can revisit this policy and make it different, but obviously I did not know we would have this firestorm coming September when school started. So when we passed this policy, nobody gave us a little hint like, by the way, this is the one that caused all the problem before with the PTAs. And then I would have went, oh yeah, that's right. And we would have rediscussed it. And so I apologize for that 100%. And I'm sorry that it's made your life difficult for the beginning of schools. And that's for all the people involved. And I don't know if I'm speaking for Donna and Dave, but I don't think I would have said okay to this policy. I think if anybody was there for the original discussion, we were pretty adamant that this was not going to fly in this community and that somehow or other we needed to get around this. And I know that our counsel is a lawyer. So he goes, he can't tell us to break the law. So I just want to know how other communities do this. And if it does mean going to the General Assembly and revisiting this law, then that will be my first priority as a school committee member this year. Interestingly, I think I did go to the Rhode Island Association of School Committees and ask a bunch of people, including our executive director, what was going on and what people were doing. And basically it was a pshaw, people are all doing it and they just have ignored the particular law. I can't expect a policy committee to ignore it, and I can't expect Mr. Anderson to ignore it or Mr. Levis. But we need to get to the bottom of it and rethink this whole thing. And I promise you that that'll be on my first thing to do. And I will, in fact, ask for the legislation to be changed if I have to.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
So as it stands right now, they can continue?
I assume it's going to be yes. We're going to go back to what we were doing previously until we revisit this policy.
That's an administrative decision by Mr.
Administrative
Levis.
decision by Mr. Levis.
But I mean, we do have a policy that's approved.
I'm sorry?
We do have a policy that has been approved.
Exactly, I get it.
Wouldn't be the first policy we don't follow, but I didn't say that. We have very old policies we're trying to revise. That's
There's
all I'm
probably
saying. They're
many
out of
of
date, they need fixing. So,
Can we still make comment or no?
Yes, I was just about ready to close it, but you can.
Real
yeah.
quick.
Sarah Silva, and I'm at 26 Clark Road. And I know that we've talked a lot about all the awesome events, and we have a lot of events, but there's also money that the PTA has brought in. Box tops, which I think all of the schools do, thousands of dollars a year, right to the school, that we're not going to be able to communicate if the policy stays as is. There's also the free clothing event. We've partnershiped with schools, Title I school, families are able to come in, so it's very important that information can go out both ways. And the PTA also recently reached out to Cardi's Furniture and our whole teacher's lounge. They donated a whole table set, a new couch, and that was all from the PTA. So I just wanted to mention those as well, and hopefully it can be revisited quickly and we're able to send the information out to continue to help.
I think it's been, I think you can't send it.
Yes, but I think the policy hopefully can be
We need to revisit it.
revisited quickly. Thank you.
Any other comments before we move on? Okay, I think we're ready to move on to number 10.
Yes.
And please feel free, if you were here just for that, you can leave. Yeah, somebody.
Or stay.
Some of the troublemakers right
You
there.
four there, you're here. Don't
No.
leave.
I always tell anybody who comes to the meeting, I mean, even our children that come, they can leave, so I'll give you a minute to. I know, you gotta go home to your kids, so I get it. All right. Okay, the discussion and approval of the commitment of funds to school lunch. Mr. Levis, did you want to take this?
Sure. So Miss Mangiarelli had come before the committee and had approval. And I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but there's a final amount that we're going to owe Aramark. We're still working on the final amount, but what we would like to do is we would like to pay them $200,000 towards that balance, and then come back at the next school committee meeting and pay, in good faith, a final balance. This is a balance that's been carried for years. We're trying to make sure that we take care of this. And we were hoping to come forward with the final balance, but I think in good faith, we're comfortable. And this is just money from our general fund, paying them $200,000 now, and then in October 11th, hopefully by that time, we'll come and pay it's another amount that'll be the final balance.
Okay.
And obviously, Ms. Mangiarelli wasn't able to be here tonight, or she'd be much more eloquent than I am. But so I would ask for the approval of to pay Aramark the $200,000.
Any questions from the committee?
Mr. Superintendent, I fully support that we have to pay the bills that we owe. But how do we come up with $200,000 that we don't owe this company?
We owe them more. We've discussed, we owe them probably a little over $400,000. And we discussed this several times. Ms. Mangiarelli has come. The last time she had approval from the committee to pay the final amount. What we're looking for tonight is just the commitment of funds for $200,000, because in good faith, we want to make a payment. We were hoping to tonight to make the final payment, but we still have, some questions about an invoice, but we're very comfortable with that, the $200,000. So it's really a good faith payment in our behalf. So we know we owe them more than $200,000. We verified invoices.
Okay, any other questions?
I actually want to ask the same question because I'm not sure it was answered.
Okay.
I know we have to pay them, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the nature of the question was, did we have this money budgeted for? Like, I know we've been talking
Yes,
about
this
it
is
for so long.
right. This is out of the fund balance. And again,
Okay.
Ms. Mangiarelli came before on one of her director's reports, talked about out of our fund balance, and had a commitment from the committee that we, indicated, I think, the first discussion that we were going to have to pay this. And then, again, this is coming out of our general fund. So this has been committed.
Okay, perfect.
But we just don't know the exact amount. So our commitment to the committee would be that when we had that final amount, we would let you know.
Okay.
So I'm not I'm not coming before you for the final amount. I'm coming before you asking, for permission to commit the $200,000.
Are they still charging us interest?
I believe they haven't charged us interest. I think that they've worked very well with us in terms of, there was interest that they were going to charge. They haven't. They've made adjustments on the invoices, but we just want to get the final invoice and know exactly what we pay, so then we're done with the payment. Again, remember, this was carried over from the Chartwells for years and years and years. So it'll be nice to finally be able to move into Sodexo, with a clean slate.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to commit general fund balance for the payment to Aramark for a partial payment owed in the school lunch fund as of July 1st, 2018, in the amount of $200,000 in accordance with School Committee Policy Number 3050.
I second the motion.
Any further questions from the committee? Anything from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to number 11, the enrollment discussion update. That was our reference number 4. Mr. Levis, did
Thanks.
you want to take that?
Sure. So I gave, through our schools, I've given you a lot of information. And we'll put this back on the agenda also, just so you know, on October 11th. October 1st, that RIDE will have an enrollment number, and we'll be able to compare it to last year's. I know we've had conversations, I know Mr. Pierce and I, you can pull data from RIDE, and there can be multiple enrollment numbers. What I did was, I think it's 4, let's see. Bear with me. And number 4 is just an overall enrollment. And you notice how we include the homeschool students in that total enrollment. If you look at our high school, that's approximately what we ended last year with, the 1138. I'm sorry, the middle school. And the high school, you know, this is so fluid, and I know Ms. Bowden is here, Mrs. Maycumber, but we have, and especially in the beginning of the year, we have a lot of transition. We have students coming and students leaving. So it doesn't really tell the story. I think what tells the story is the information that I shared behind. So when you look at the middle school numbers, you'll see that the max class size of 28, and look at how many classes are 28. Some of the lower classes are like our intervention classes, but those are fluid. Those are constantly moving. And the same thing at the high school. I mean, I think it's important to remember that we eliminated 13 positions at the high school. When we sat down and looked at numbers, we needed another 4.5 to 6.5 teachers at the middle school. We did not add, any teachers at the middle school. In fact, we had a long, I don't want to rehash, but the conversation about the librarian that we eliminated. So I wanted to give you a clearer picture of the numbers. And the elementary school, right now we're in a fairly decent position because of the movement that very few of our classrooms, our schools are closed right now. So because what that means is displacement, and with displacement is additional costs. Two things. One is a person moves into a community or a district thinking they're going to be able to go to school there, and then we have to transport them someplace else, which is not a positive way to start a relationship with a family. And then secondly, there's an additional cost because we're busing them out of their district. So with the elementary school, you can see that right now we're in a pretty good shape. But I wanted to highlight one thing about Ms. Bowden. We have a lot of situations where we had a lot of overages, and there's class sizes that, maximum, caseload of 125 students. At one point, we had over 130 overages, and with the work of scheduling and moving students around, we're down to, I believe, around 40 overages now. And maybe less than that, because on a daily basis. And that means we're placing kids. She's doing a lot of work placing students. There's also a dollar amount to that also. You notice I put on approval for a position, but then in conversation, right now, we don't need that additional 0.2. That'll be tabled, but that's because of the work of the high school. But I wanted to, again, not just everybody's working hard in all of our schools, but I wanted to highlight just the work that Mrs. Bowden has done this year, because that additional, if we had those 100 and some odd overages, there's a dollar amount with each one of those. And I appreciate the work. And again, we eliminated 13 positions at the high school based on the numbers that we had at that time, because we needed to balance the budget. So I want to applaud the administration, and the same thing at the middle school. I mean, Ozzy Nobelushi and Lisa Goodwin and Mr. Lucian, they worked extremely hard in months trying to make this schedule work. And if you see, there's so little leeway at the middle school. So again, making it work, the flexibility of our teachers. But if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But if you dive into this, and we'll put it on the agenda for next meeting, and I'll have, again, some better comparisons in terms of where we were last year and this year. One of the things we noticed at the high school, was that we start losing kids, like between the years of, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. And I'm hoping that with a lot of the work that's been going on in our pathways programs and our flexibility, that will stop some of those students from leaving. And again, students leave for a variety of reasons. And you can look at our elementary enrollment numbers that we'll have a class at one point, one of the high classes, of 300 and, right now, like 55 students,
392.
392.
That's the high school side.
You can look at like the elementary class sizes.
Fine.
But it was several weeks ago, in the summer, we had several schools and several grades that were maxed out, which was going to put us in a position, we thought, where we'd have over 10 displacements. But again, Don Cowart, working with our registration individuals at central office and our principals, did an outstanding job. And I think it's interesting. We've had an enrollment increase of 59 students just since June 25th in elementary. We had a family the other night come in, and they drove in at 2 a.m, came from New York, bought a house, I think it's Whaley Hollow Road, 3 young children, and, just bought a house there. And so we've had a lot of registrations, and that's a good thing.
It is good.
So, again, I'll bring this back, put this on the agenda for next school committee meeting, and if you have questions. But I instead of just giving these basic charts, I thought if you have the classes, you can take a look and drill
It
down.
really does help, yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions before we move on? Yep.
Thank you for this. It's good to see both building population and also classroom sizes, because we don't, in the past, I don't know if we've always gotten that classroom size information. So it's really important to understand.
Just for the
that.
elementary, I think.
The elementary
Yeah.
did,
I
yeah.
never got max capacity.
Sure, on the classrooms. It's important, I'm a stickler for this kind of data because I think there are 2 sets of data that become the most important, so I want to make sure we talk about them in the future. I think the October enrollment data is important because unfortunately, that's the only thing RIDE publishes on their website. But I also think that I think it's March when
March
we
1st.
have to submit the enrollment that
For
actually
funding.
counts toward
Yeah.
the funding, and that we talk about it again as well. It's I don't want to discount how busting at the seams some of these classrooms are, but it is interesting to note when you look at this at a building level, the redistribution of the elementary and the pre-K has really relieved some of the pressure on some of the elementary schools from a building-wide perspective. The population at Black Rock is really at a 15, 16-year low. Same with Tioga, and I know those schools were pretty well packed. So it's interesting to see that. But of course, that puts Washington Oak near the 15-year high. Not quite there yet, though. But the other thing of note, looking at this data, because I'm all about trends, because it's about the trends. We're pretty flat for the past 4 years with school population. It's an interesting thing. This is mine. Can't have it. Sorry. I keep my own spreadsheet of this stuff. This is mostly just RIDE data, but I plugged in Craig's recent data into the last row here. But yeah, over the past 4 years, we're sort of flat population-wise. It
Right, and
seems, we were curving down. It
Right.
seems to-
The NESDEC study said that, I think, between 2013 to 2023, they projected about a loss of 200 and some odd students. I think we talked about this, Ms. Pearson. I think we saw, when we implemented all-day K, we had, I think, about an increase of about 167 students, but we started to see students leaving between 9 and 10, 10 and 11, 11 and 12. And so those are things that I think with what I know what's happening now is we're drilling down, instead of just accepting it, trying to figure out, looking at individual students, when you talked about looking at trends. Like when we talked about, homeschool, we know that we lost a lot of students, 11th graders, 5 or 6, going to homeschool. Well, that's not, again, it's why they want to homeschool them, but we also know there were other patterns and other things. Yeah. It's not typical. So I think the nice thing is we have the capacity now to really drill down and look at those areas. And so hopefully we can, if there's things that we need to do and improve, which we know there are, then we can address that instead of just accepting it as is. And there's a lot of construction. I met with the town planner, Carolyn Wells, yesterday, I believe, and just talking about the families coming into town and some of the construction that's going on. So I think, we're hopefully looking at the right things, but I like, I appreciate at least your acknowledgement that there are places where we are busting in the seams and
Classrooms.
the classrooms.
The building populations are historically down overall.
Right,
so.
but I think the key is that our classrooms, the numbers are because of the reductions in staff,
Yes.
and we said
Can't
that
say
last
that.
year. So, we just have to we have to look at that because obviously there's budget implications. But anyways, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Mr. Levis, what I noticed going through these numbers, that some classrooms have 28 children. There doesn't seem to be, it doesn't seem to be a downturn. I mean, the middle school is at 1138, and the high school, that it seems to be climbing up, 1475 at this time of the year.
Steady for a while.
Well, it was 1484 last year.
Right,
Dave,
and
so, at the high school.
2 weeks ago, I think
For
we
October.
were at 1494. Right, so it's very. I think the high school right now is very fluid.
Okay, so 2 weeks ago, we had 10 more kids than we had last year.
2013.
Right.
I mean, if you look at October numbers in 2013, we had 1694. So
28 is a lot.
that's why I'm saying the last 4 years is important. We're kind of flat, which means the curve could very quickly start going back up.
That's
Right.
a contrast.
Development.
Right.
But I mean, even as far as the max amount, is that like statewide? Is that,
Wait a minute.
And Washington Oak at 663.
Right, but don't forget Washington Oak. We moved the preschool programs there, and you can come up, Bowden. We moved the preschool programs there. Those are half-day programs, so we have 160 somewhat students in preschool. 130. Thank you. But those students go half a day, so it still impacts the number, but they're there for. We have morning, AM, and PM programs.
I just wanted to say with the numbers at the high school, and thank you for the credit for bringing down the overages, but they'll probably be going back up. I know only because if you look at the numbers, especially in the 9th grade classrooms, especially in social studies, some in science, they're full, they're maxed out. So the teachers, there's no more places for me to put students in, especially in social studies. So this week we had 5 new students come in, 3 of them were 9th graders, so those will be additional overages. The other thing that I'm concerned about, and I know I've talked about it with Mr. Levis before, is if students are in honors classes and need to come down to a college prep level, there's nowhere for me to put them. So right now I have 4 or 5 on my desk and I'm saying, no, you can't move, you have to try to stay there for a little while longer. I don't want to put students in a situation where they're not in their proper level, but I have no room right now. I know at one point we discussed possibly adding, to come to you and ask for a .4 in social studies so that we could try to, that would eliminate 11 or 12 of the 35 or 40 overages that we have left. But there's nowhere for us to go. And as new kids come in, or as kids want to move, there's just no movement.
Right. But I think this is what we're, and a point that I need to make is that this is fluid. I know there are concerns about our budget, and I want to be clear that, we cut based on what we need to cut, but we also have to address students' needs. And as superintendent, if we need to, we'll come back forward. Part of it, though, is that when I made the presentation before, and I was honest in saying I could have easily gone into the budget and said we're going to cut this and cut that to allocate the funds, but we're kind of sitting waiting till after October 1st next week, sitting down, looking at our budget as a whole, and we did freeze the budget. right? It was 10 days into school, we froze our budget. So we're looking at recognizing that we may have additional needs that we have to address. So this is, you know, and I have to come before the committee and have those conversations. So we know this is a fluid situation, and despite everything that's going on, the primary responsibility for us is to address student needs. So I appreciate all the effort you've done, the high school, the middle school, the elementary, all of our administrators and our central office staff have done, I think, a great job, because this is an ongoing process. These conversations take place all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public before we move on? Okay. And number 12 was tabled. Subcommittee updates. Any committee updates? Yep.
Okay, this will be very quick. The Career and Technical Education Subcommittee met this week. We discussed data. We looked specifically at expenditures by program and revenue coming in by program, or revenue coming in from a variety of sources. We have 2 more meetings, or 3 meetings scheduled coming up, and we will continue to look at data with the goal in mind to determine the scope of the subcommittee. The Superintendent's Evaluation Subcommittee also met this week. We've come up with a timetable that's been distributed to all members of the school committee, and our next meeting is October 9th. The Policy Subcommittee met a couple of weeks ago, and its next meeting is October 11th, and we have a very full agenda. Thank you.
Okay, I guess it's you
It's me.
again.
So, school safety, I just wanted to say that I did submit, that the committee approved last committee meeting, I did submit the approval of the request for RIDE for the School Building Fund Authority Capital, School Building Authority Capital Fund. So we've submitted that to the Rhode Island Department of Ed. And we still haven't heard back, I know, from the COPS grant in terms of looking at some other safety equipment. We haven't heard back from that, whether or not that was, we've received that funding. And then the third part of that is at some point, and I don't know when that'll take place, but I do want to have a conversation with the town council and with the school committee in terms of the Secure Our City report. My concern is that I'm not sure that the town council, it's unclear to me, and I think there were some committee members there, whether the town council has even seen that report. I've gotten mixed information. And I think they need to see that report and hear that from the municipal side prior to us meeting. And I.
What's going on?
And Craig,
Pardon?
and you're moving forward with, I'm trying to complete your train of thought before.
Oh, I don't know. I lost it, so. Okay. But anyways, I just want to be, let the committee know, I'm not trying to drag my feet with that. We've talked about that. I just think,
Did you see the article in the Providence Journal about how many requests for that safety money there were? It was almost twice as much as what is being out there. And Coventry was named. Did you know that we were named?
No, I didn't.
Yes, we were named as, we asked for safety lighting. So they actually named Coventry, which I thought was interesting.
So and I think, didn't we talk about the start of school before?
Yes.
That's
we can
that's
forget
off.
that.
The principal update, I do want to say that I've been working with Ms. Andrews, with Ms. Maycumber, the rest of the leadership team. Ms. Bowden's been part of that. Mrs. Bowden, I should say Mrs. Maycumber, Mrs. Andrews, apologize. And at the next school committee meeting, we're working on, so 2 things, is trying to look at the needs of the high school. I'm gonna put in an interim. The plan is to have that start on October 15th. I'll come before the school committee on October 11th. I'm not looking just to put a body in there just so we can say, okay, we'll body and we'll continue for the rest of this year. We have some lofty goals for the NEASC that have been put in place. We have a lot of work that's been done. I think you will see it October 11th. It aligns with my goals, the strategic plan, coming back and showing you the work that's been done the last couple of years and the work that's been done by the administration, the teachers, support-related personnel. We'll be looking at curriculum. We'll be looking at all kinds of data. We'll be looking at our finance. We'll be looking at some facilities work that we've done. But I think we need to continue moving that. You know, we can't use the excuse that we don't have the resources or limited resources, which is a truth. But we're going to continue to move forward. So we're putting together a plan. I think it's a comprehensive plan, and I'll share that with committee. That'll still be a cost-effective plan moving forward. But we don't have the luxury to stand still. We don't have the luxury just to say this is a year that we're going to hold back. I mean, we know the high school's our flagship. They've done an incredible job this year. I've only been here. This is the beginning of my third year, but I have to say it's been an outstanding start. You know, I mean, despite the heat, despite all the adversity that we faced this year, they've done an incredible job. I think all of our schools have, but I want to keep that momentum going. So I wasn't comfortable just coming tonight. I need to also, Ms. Mandrielli will be back hopefully next week sometime. We'll sit down and I need to make sure this all works. So when I present to you, but I appreciate the effort that, you know, my feeling is I could easily say this is what we're going to do, but my feeling is the more involved people are, the more committed they are. And they're definitely, the high school's been definitely a lot of passion this year and very positive vibe if you haven't been in there. And I applaud that. And I want to support that. So we'll be coming back to you. And I say we because I'll have them also present. I think I think it'll be a good comprehensive plan that'll keep us moving forward and continue with the growth that this community and that the school committee should expect from us. So that's the principal update. And the last thing is the budget process. I'm concerned about just the dynamics, I'll be honest, as superintendent, between the school committee and the school department, I should say, in working with the council moving forward. I know there'll be an election. I know the beautiful thing for me is that there's a lot of stability with us. And but we have to really strategize. I thought last year, you know, we did a lot of different things. And I know many people have given me advice and suggested or asked me how we're going to get people engaged. And we'll talk more about that, but I really want to have an active role with even when we present our budget to the school committee. I'm going to make sure that I have more people present than just me sitting there with Sarah and going through numbers, that we'll have our principals, our department, our directors present and highlight how the budget impacts students. And then talking about when we present to the council, it was, you know, when I went a couple of weeks ago, you know, I saw a very direct approach in terms of making it the superintendent versus the school committee. And when I'm public, I hope that I represent the school committee well in the sentiments. And if I don't, I will say this is my opinion. But I would like to enlist the support of the school committee when we do presentations to the council, because I feel that with your support, I need to engage and inform, and we'll talk more about that. I've had conversations with our administrators, and I definitely, I don't want to blindside anybody, but I'd really like your involvement, and I think we can partner, and whether or not it's an individual from the committee works with the special education, an individual works with facilities. I have a school committee member partner with finance. I think having your advocacy will be helpful. Because it's easy to dismiss just the superintendent in the schools, but I think if we come as a unified front, at least I have some ideas I'd like to pose. Again, I'm in no position to dictate, but I'd like to suggest some strategies, and also looking at how we use social media in a positive approach. And but I think the schools have been stable, and we've provided that, and we've continued to move forward. And as Mr. Pearson said, looks at our, you know, there was a projection that we were going to lose 200 and some odd students, and now the last 4 years, flat, you know, doesn't always mean good, but in this case, it does. It is a good thing, I believe. And so there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of possibilities. So we'll be talking more about that. But we're going to be starting the budget process next month, October, next week. So it's already upon us. So that's my report.
Thank you. Were there any questions from the committee for the superintendent? Anything from the public? Seeing none, chairperson's report is next, and I have nothing to report. And agenda item number 16, citizens' comments. Are there any comments? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I know we do have at least one, but we
Okay.
have
All
two.
right. Are there citizens' comments?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Oates, court-appointed special advocate for children from the Rhode Island Family Court. A lot of things, when you come to these meetings, there's so much negativity. However, I think it was very important for me to bring this to you. On or about September 12, I had a situation that required immediate action. And I met with a Mr. Brad Wilson at the school administration office to discuss two children for whom I advocate in the family court system. These children were transferred from another community and they were registered here in Coventry. They had already been in class for a few days and had full schedules. However, due to some lost paperwork at the DCYF office, this move was never made official. And at that point, the DCYF demanded that these children return to their previous school until a conference call could be made, which would be in a month or so they could make a decision on to which school district these children would attend. The Coventry School Department, Mr. Wilson, and he spoke with a few other people, agreed with me and with the guardian ad litem that it would be far more traumatic to move these children back to the previous school district just to bring them back here to Coventry in a month. So the children never went back to the previous community. And this is all due to the prompt attention of Mr. Wilson and the school department staff here in Coventry. The conference call was eventually made, and the state decided that the children will remain here in Coventry. When these children were interviewed by different state agencies, they both stated that they did not want to go back to the community they came from due to all the bad memories and trauma they endured while living in that community. They stated that here in Coventry, they felt like real people, and they were spoken to as if they really matter. The young lady, the sister and this brother and sister pair, stated that, quote, here in Coventry, they speak with me. They talk to you, back in the previous community, they talk to you like you're nothing and you don't matter. They both stated to 3 different agencies that we feel like we matter for the first time in our lives. Also, the foster mom states that the children were terrified about going to a new school because of all the traumatic experiences in that previous community. Now, she's thrilled to inform me that these children come home with smiles on their faces and they're happy to share the events of the day in Coventry School, instead of withdrawing into their own little world. The tremendous advances that they have made in these few short weeks is a testimonial to the Coventry school system. And this has been noted in my reports to the judge and the attorneys handling this case. Kudos to the Coventry School Department and the Coventry school family, all these moms and dads. I don't get a lot of positive things of certain school departments, but here in Coventry, I'm very, very happy with the service that you guys provide. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. It's really wonderful news to hear. Any other?
again.
Yes, please.
Jessica Cohn, 41 Ray Street. It's just really a question. so I'm pretty new at this, but on the agenda, it says a vote may be taken on any item on this agenda. And you had asked a few times earlier if you could vote, and members said no on a certain, I believe it was 60, I don't want to bring that back up, but 10. And the attorney said it had to be specifically said on the agenda that if you were to vote on something.
That's a
But
good point.
with that statement, why would it specifically say you needed to vote on an issue when, given that statement?
I don't know the answer to that, Gene.
Yeah, we can, I'll ask the attorney. That's a good point.
I'm not
I-
sure, yeah.
I have, the only thing I'm aware of is school committees are treated differently than every other public body in the state, of course. Another one to bring to the GA.
Yeah.
We as a school committee, like the town council, if they were hearing something and if they wanted to add something to their agenda for discussion, they could have no problem doing that. If the school committee tried to even just add something to our agenda for discussion, I don't think we can under state law. We're treated differently. But that is still a good question for the attorney, and I'd love to
I know
know
that
that.
that's a fairly new addition to
Well-
our agenda, and I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that
Well,
appeared
I think the reason we put it on there is so that we could vote on anything, but, right, but I think the fact is that maybe yeah, that's a good point.
It's a very good
So we'll address that with him.
We might have to take that off.
Because I'm new
No,
and
no,
I
no,
didn't
no,
get
no.
it. Okay. All
No,
right. You
no.
guys don't get it either.
I think, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it is a very nice catch.
Yeah, well,
Yep. Did you want to
say
come?
on that, I
Yeah.
think that what the lawyer was saying was because it's only on as a discussion is why we wouldn't be able to vote on it. Yeah, but since you change it.
He forgot that it was on the bottom.
No, it does say that. We'll have to figure that out. I know.
Good catch, thank you.
Sure. Okay, I didn't think it was. Mr. Florio?
I have a citizen's comment. I went to Oak Haven Elementary School. I voted there on primary day. And I looked at it the day before. And I have to say, Mr. Levis, it's very good. You've done a wonderful job with that former elementary school.
Yet. I haven't even gone there.
Physically, I didn't do anything, Mr. Flores.
No, you didn't do anything, but the Jason Martin did. And so did his secretary and the staff there. And
Yeah, we need to go visit.
it looks good, Mr. Levis. It looks really good. And the neighbors are very happy about it because they're working with the neighborhood. And I hear all positives.
Good.
So, some good news, Mr. Levis. Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion to schedule the next meeting?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. Okay, Madam Chair, a little quick here. Then I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, October 11th, 2018 at 6 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And finally, is there a motion to adjourn? It looks like I have 8:42.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:42.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everyone, for coming.